Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about how to shoot a cinematic product video in just a few hours. Let's go. So I challenged myself to shoot 5 product videos in 5 days. So I'm launching a video series where all of the product videos you see were only shot in 1 day or a couple of hours. And with that, I wanted to show you if you use simple and quick techniques, you can still create something really cinematic. For this particular video, we shoot a drink commercial. We have a black and a white can, and we want to keep it really simple and cinematic. Because in this video I used some super slow motion techniques. I had to use more gear than I usually use in my videos, because for that super slow motion camera you actually need a lot of light. So this is what I use in this video. I used 2 Nanlite Pavo tubes, then I used my Forza 720D, then I used my Nanlite Forza 500D, and then I used my Forza 300D. Those 3 Forza light I wouldn't have not used if I hadn't shot the slow motion, but for that slow motion it's really necessary to get the most amount of light possible, so I actually used all my lights that I had. But if you don't shoot that kind of slow motion, you actually can get away with just the 2 Pavo tubes. For cameras I used my Sony FX3, and then for the slow motion shot I used the Kronos 2.1. For the FX3 I used my Tamron 28-75 2.8 lens, and for the Kronos I actually used a Meike 35mm fixed lens. It works really well with that camera, and I bought it a few months ago and I'm really happy with how the results are. Other gear that I used was a Lazy Susan I used for rotating the cans. Then I used a table with a glass top so I can get some reflections off of the glass. Then I used a reflector, a 5-in-1 reflector. I actually used it 2 sides. One time to diffuse the light shining through, and then I also used a reflector to bounce the light off to fill in the shadows a little bit more. I also used a black paper backdrop as my background. It makes it easier to mask out stuff. And for cinematic drink commercials, I really like the black look. I also used a spray bottle to really make the cans look more fresh. I also mixed it with glycerin. I mixed glycerin and water because the glycerin makes the moisture stick better on the cans and it doesn't run off as easy. So that's a little tip for you. Use glycerin mixed with water so you don't have to spray that often and the moisture actually stays on the can. And you might see that in a few behind the scenes video. I actually used a slider for some shots, but I didn't end up using any of the shots because for masking it's actually harder to mask out the cans if there's moving footage. So I stuck with the still shots. But yeah, for this video I just wanted to show you the most easy and quick way to shoot a cinematic video, and you don't actually need a slider for that. The slider makes it a little bit more cinematic, but if you are on a time crunch you have to always think about the movement and stuff like that. If you just have a still can, you can also add some movement in post. So if you press for time, don't use the slider, just use it still and then add some movement in post-production. If you've seen my previous videos, you know that I like the cinematic and darker style. And this also plays in our cards today because we want to have the most quick and simple videos, but still wanted to make it look good. And this style really helps us with that, because if you have everything bright and everything, you need more lights and it's harder to light it and everything. If you just use a cinematic and kind of teasing video, sometimes one light is just enough. You're just gonna tease with the light the different products that you're shooting. For this product, the dark look really works well, but keep in mind this doesn't work for any product. If you shoot something colorful, it doesn't necessarily have to be the black background and doesn't always work with that. Okay, let's jump into the first setup. I set up the cans and I didn't spray them yet because I just wanted them look as natural as possible. And then I used 2 Pavo tubes and put one on the top. I just hold it with my hands, and one I laid flat on the table to shine on it from the bottom, kinda, to evenly light it up. And I also used the glass table to get a reflection of the can on the table, which makes it a little bit more interesting. And then all the magic for this shot actually happened in post. I kind of came up with the idea when I chose the song for this video. When I listened to the song, I had the idea to make it kind of a flicker beginning And it's cool because I have a black can and a white can, and it really works with the flicker really well. So what I ended up doing is I just created these quick cuts, and I really had to line the separate shots of the black and the white can up that it matches them perfectly. And then I also mask around the cans, which really helps for separation. And then I dragged them along, changed the sizing that they match perfectly. And the black background really helps with masking. You don't have to be super accurate when you do that, because gonna have a black background anyways. And then I just nested the quick cuts of the cans together and then added some zoom in post. This is really simple to do, but I recently changed my editing programs. I switched from Premiere Pro to DaVinci Resolve, and I really had to figure out how to do this in DaVinci, because I think it's a little bit more complicated than in Premiere. But once you know what you're doing, you can do everything you do in Premiere, you can also do in DaVinci, and the program is way faster and doesn't crash as often. So, but yeah, for this shot, the setup is really simple, but I made it way more interesting in post-production. So this time I sprayed the can with the glycerin water solution, and it really makes it look fresh and cold. I also used the Lazy Susan to make the cans rotate, and I also wanted to have a drop coming down on the can, so I really had to time it. I also lit it again with the same setup that I had in the first one pavo tube at the top, one pavo tube at the bottom, and as I said, the other pavo tube, the top one, I hold in my hand and made it shine on the label of the bottom that this is illuminated. And also with the water droplets, it makes it really look better, because the water kind of reflects the light and makes it look really cinematic. Again, with this shot, I also masked around the object again. This was a little bit more tricky because it actually rotates, so I had to use keyframes. But the masking really makes the shot and the background these rich blacks that otherwise you wouldn't get. And you can also manipulate the cans easier, because if you mask around, you can just like rotate it in any form and shape you want. So masking in this is really important, but it's not too hard because you're on the black background anyways, and you're in that dark setting already. Setup number 3 was actually the same shot I used in setup 2, but now I wanted to add some more interest to the shot, and I masked in a opener, like at the top of the can there's this opening metal thing, and I masked that in and I shot that separately. Let me show you how I did that. So I teared up the metal opener from the can and I taped it to a nail, and then held it in front of the camera and used my hand to kind of turn it and make it seem that it's opening, like flip it over and rotate it. This took a bunch of times because it's not that easy to keep it level and to have the amount of rotation that looks more the most realistic. But after a few tries I was satisfied. Then I placed it on top of the rotating can and masked around the opener, and then added some mist that I downloaded from Storyblocks. And I feel like this took a little bit of like fine-tuning to make everything look realistic, but in the end this really works. It's a pretty non-traditional way, I think, to doing that, but sometimes you have to just try out new things, and the two shots together really worked well. So shot 4 was the slow motion shot. I used the Chronos 2.1 to get these shots, and it's a camera that can shoot 1000 frames per second. So you need a lot of light for this. I used all the lights that I have. I used the Forza 720D on the background, on the black background. I just put it on the floor and let it shine up to illuminate the background. Because when you shoot glass, it's really the best when you have the background lit up, and I used a glass filled with fake ice cubes as a prop for this shot. And for lighting up the can, I used the Forza 500 to shoot through a diffuser, and then reflecting it back from the other side I put the reflector, and this was lit up by the Forza 300. So a lot of lights. The 300 was lighting up the reflector kind of like in a sandwich, so I brightened up the shadows. And the can was lit by the 500, and then the background was lit by the 720. So the ending shot is pretty simple. I just animated 2 cans revealing the logo and then go out to the sides, and the logo appears in the middle. It's a pretty simple ending shot, but really effective in my opinion. And how this works is again with keyframes. You start off in the middle and then set a point there, and then make another keyframe to the sides, and then just animate it in from there. So that's it. Thanks so much for sticking around until the end of the video. I hope you learned something today. As always, a quick and easy way to support the channel is hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed, you might consider doing so. I'd really appreciate it. If you have any questions, shoot me a message on Instagram at sebpiccinema, and I'll see you in the next video.